This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Lotierzo, former fighter, part-time writer, full-time observer, and I'm joined by co-host Jack Hirsch, former six-term president of the Boxing Writers of Association. Jack, how are you doing tonight?
Good. I have a smile on my face. I can't help it. Remember the Rocky movie where Rocky was doing the newscast, for the sports with the broadcast, and Paulie kept sticking his face in the back, the guy
Yes.
talking to me. That's kind of our producer, Mac. He's always there in the beginning of the show.
Yes, he is.
Always there. He's my partner on the Mac and Jack Sports Show. He's the A side to that show. I'm the B side. So, I want to give him a little bit of a plug. That's Mac, in case anyone wonders.
He's a big Giants fan and New York teams, right? But Jack, so are you.
Yeah, well, we're both Yankee fans. He's a Giant fan. I'm a Jet fan.
And I root for the Giants when they play the Eagles. The only time I root for the Giants, and the only time I root for the Yankees is when they play the Phillies.
Well, you never root for the Eagles, Frank. You hate the Eagles. Well, what do we have in boxing here?
Well, Jack, there was a bunch of cards. Good evening, Jason. There was a bunch of cards this weekend. You said that you went to the DAZN card.
No, I watched. It was insane.
You watched that, okay? Because I missed that completely. So why don't you fill us in on that card?
Yeah. I had to work. I had to do a report for Boxing News, world's best boxing publication in the UK, older than Ring Magazine. It still comes out in print.
Right.
Not only that, but online. And if you haven't heard on Boxing News, then shame on you if you're out there. But the main event was Jesse Rodriguez. Now, Jesse Rodriguez would have been, Frank, the 2022 Fight of the Year if Dimitri Bivol didn't come up big and beat Canelo, because he scored a couple of monster wins in 2022. He beat Carlos Quadros and he beat Saurabh Vasai.
Two big names, elite level guys.
Right, and then he was a little off in his last fight against the fight Israel Gonzalez, still won. So he was moving down in weight, and I know you hate that when a fighter moves down in weight, but he was moving down from the 115-pound
to 112
super flyweight division back down to the flyweight division. And he was taking on Christian Gonzalez, a fighter who never fought outside of Mexico, for the vacant WBO title. Rodriguez won a clear decision. Did he look outstanding? He was fighting in his hometown of San Antonio. No, he didn't. He kind of faded a bit the second half of the fight, but let's not be critical of him because he suffered a broken jaw, he said, in round 6. And you could tell the way he was talking after the fight. Very uneasy, uneven. And so under the circumstances of a broken jaw, he did well. On that show, arguably the biggest upset of 2023 took place. A fighter from the Philippines, Marlon Tapales, he beat Mirajan Akhmadaliev for the WBA and IBF super bantamweight titles, And there's a lesson to be learned in that fight, Frank. We always talk about the championship rounds. The early rounds are just as important.
Of course.
As important. But everyone remembers the way a fighter closes the fight. Akhmadaliev won the last 4 rounds on all scorecards, but 2 judges had him losing 115, 113. The other judge had him winning 118, 110, which was way out of line. But what happened, he lost 7 of the first 8 rounds. And then he came on and won the last 4. But it wasn't
almost like De La Hoya and Trinidad.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, absolutely. but it really shouldn't have been enough to close the gap. I had it scored a draw. So maybe I shouldn't say that, because he did catch up finally, I thought, and took that fight. And there were a couple more fights I want to mention. Raymond Ford, a featherweight prospect from New Jersey, he soundly outpointed former belt holder Jesse Magdaleno. I'm getting tongue-tied here. And it was a classic case of a young prospect putting a scalp on his record. Ford should have gotten a stoppage. He was in camp training alongside Shakur Stevenson. He fights just like Shakur, who you're going to talk about in a little while. And last, there was a thrilling fight. Thomas Matisse from Cleveland, do you call it junior lightweight, Frank, a super featherweight? What do you prefer?
I call it junior lightweight.
Okay, so let me go there, because I'm
130
like you are. I'm old school like you are, exactly. So I'm kind of adjusting to the modern times, and I kind of don't want to do that. Junior lightweight Thomas Matisse down on points, going into the 10th round. His corner tells him you need a stoppage to win. How often do we see it? So he hurts his opponent, a Mexican fighter, Romero Cecina, and he pours it on. But Cecina's blocking every single punch, and the ref stops it because of an impression. Okay? And that was that.
And we'll get to that in another fight, too.
Shown by the zone. And before I turn it over to you, of course, between fights, they always have the promoter, what they have planned, and Eddie Hearn is there with Edgar Berlanga. Let me repeat, Berlanga is a nice kid. He is a nice kid, from everything I could tell. And he's not a bad fighter, but Frank, he's an unbeaten fighter who's a mid-level gatekeeper. Without losing a fight, I'm already calling him a mid-level gatekeeper, not an elite gatekeeper, but not a bad gatekeeper. But he's a gatekeeper, and Eddie Hearn is saying, he's going to be a superstar, talking about matching him with Canelo, 3 fights. He's going to be a superstar in this sport, Berlanga. I mean, what a hype job. Berlanga,
well, Jack, that's Eddie Hearn.
But Berlanga would get run out of the ring by elite fighters, run out of the ring. I'll give you an example. I'm not high on Caleb Plant, for example. You know that, okay? I think Caleb Plant soundly beat Edgar Berlanga.
Tonight, okay? Absolutely. Okay, but Jack, remember what Eddie Hearn is doing. As I said to you a year ago, Berlanga, because he has power, he's good looking, the Spanish following, he is just one win away from being in a big fight. And remember, Jack, this isn't the NFL or the MLB. You can pick your opponents here. And Eddie Hearn has enough pull where he can feed him the right guys to try to build him up. No, Berlanga is not going to be a guy we're going to talk about when he retires. But Eddie Hearn will get him in a big fight.
But Frank, I'm not mad at Berlanga. I want him to make all the money he can. I want him to get any opportunity he can. You know who I'm annoyed at? Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez is going to continue to maintain that high pound-for-pound ranking. And some people they'll have him 1, 2, whatever, 3. He lost to Bivol, so maybe he slipped out behind Crawford, but he could regain the number 1 pound-for-pound rating without necessarily fighting Bivol. And if he ever does fight Bivol again, we both know he's going to make Bivol come down and wait to compromise him. Okay.
Well, say he doesn't, Jack. Let's just say that he doesn't, and he fights him at 175 again. Then what?
If he does that, I'm not against an elite fighter like Canelo that every monster challenge he takes, he could take 2 easier fights after, then take another monster challenge, then 2 easier fights. I'm okay with alternating. My fear is this is what Canelo's going to do the rest of his career. He's going to cherry pick the rest of his career.
I don't think he has that latitude, Jack, like Mayweather had. I don't. I think after the Ryder fight, he has to fight either Bivol or Benavidez. And the fans will not accept anything but. If he doesn't do that, then I think there's a lot of merit to what you said. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he fights one of those two guys. It'll probably be Bivol. But if he does that and he fights him at 175, Jack, so many guys pick, the catch weight and go that route. I got to give the guy credit. He fought a top guy, and there's just as many people out there that think he would beat Beterbiev as there are that Beterbiev would beat Bivol. So I can't put him down for that. I don't think he'll beat Bivol, but if he goes at it again at 175, I can't rip him and say he's cherry picking.
Oh, let me just say this, Frank. June 24th, Eddie Hearn announced at the Garden, Belanga's going to be in the main event in the small arena against Jason Quigley.
Yeah.
Jason Quigley, let me give you the best description I can. He's like a quarterback that was drafted high and is now third string
on his 8th team
somewhere. Right, exactly.
Yes. Exactly. That means nothing.
And Belanga's not an absolute lock to win that fight. With that said, he probably will, but he's not a lock. Even
if he can't beat Quigley at this point, Jack, he might as well hang it up.
I would think he would be a little too good for Quigley, but I can't say with certainty.
Jack, before we go on to the ESPN card, let me just say this about Rodriguez. It was confirmed that he broke his jaw in the 6th round. Jack, I broke my jaw sparring, and I boxed 2 rounds after that. In fact, I was sparring Alex Ramos, and he caught me with my mouth open with a right hand in the 1st round. It hurt, but I didn't realize it. We did 2 more rounds, and then I realized when I tried to take my mouthpiece out, I couldn't open my mouth, and I had to go to Temple Hospital and got my jaw wired in the ER. But my point is this. You have no idea the kind of toughness and courage it is for a guy to fight with a broken jaw with those small gloves. I'll tell you what, I salute that guy because I've been down that road. And when we did it, I think we were wearing 14-ounce gloves. I had headgear on. There was only the guys in the gym. It wasn't a TV audience. I got to give Rodriguez credit. That's a tough guy right there to go those additional 6 rounds. And if he gave it up at the end, well, he has a legitimate excuse.
Let me ask you a question, Frank. I've never asked you before. The most famous broken jaw in history was Ali against Ken Norton in their first fight. Now, there's a little bit of controversy when it happened. Of course, Norton's going to say it happened in round 12, meaning he was able to do all the good work.
Right.
And Ali heard it at the end. Ali says it happened in the
second round.
It happened early. I side with the Ali thing. Ali either said first or second round because Howard Cosell kept making mention of something about
the blood, how his mouth was bleeding from the inside.
Right.
He thought he broke his tooth.
And that's the giveaway, that it happened early in the fight.
And you know what's funny, Jack, about that? You could make a case that both guys, it could be legit because Ali didn't really fight that well for the rest of the fight. You could tell he wasn't right besides not being in shape. But on Norton's side, it's like the 2 fights I had after that when Ali was healthy, he competed with him, head to head. So
yeah,
I guess it's all in what you believe. I kind of tend it happened early. But Jack, we're talking about Ali, maybe one of the toughest and bravest fighters ever.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the ESPN card that was headlined by Shakur Stevenson. He fought the Japanese fighter Yoshenko. I can't pronounce his name. I'm not even going to try, but Yoshenko came in undefeated. He was an aggressive attacker. There was a lot of talk before the fight where Yoshenko questioned Stevenson's power, didn't think he could hit hard. That got Stevenson mad. And Jack, at the end of the day, Stevenson's performance in his debut fight at 135, you couldn't ask for anything more. He won every minute. He won every facet of it. He ended up being the puncher in the fight. And if you remember, I did a post before the fight saying that, I get a kick out of some of the aggressive macho type fighters when they're fighting a so-called stylish boxer. They always say they can't hit, but yet for some reason, when they get in there, they just can't walk through them and overwhelm them. And it just goes to show timing, distance, and accuracy nullifies blunt power. And when you get hit with shots that you don't see, even though they're not big shots, they make a difference. And you just can't walk to the guy like he's handcuffed. So I've read many people since the fight, they think now Stevenson is the guy to beat at 135. I would have a hard time arguing with that. He is a complete fighter. 135 may be his ceiling, but I'll just say this, Jack. I know you liked him all along, and I did too, but this is the most impressed I was with him because he dominated the fight. And some people think it was stopped too soon, but I think the ending was inevitable, and they just saved Yoshenko from getting slaughtered.
You know, you have a term, Frank, which I'm fascinated by, which I never thought about until I heard it from you, that term. You talk about the greatest swarmers, okay? Greatest swarmers. Now, Stevenson's an exact opposite. I'd like to use the term shutdown style. He has the most difficult shutdown style in all of boxing. I mean, to penetrate his style and beat him, that's the hardest style of all. And, you know, the way he fights within that style, very, very difficult. I mean, if you're a very aggressive fighter, in a way you're playing into his hands. And if you fight just like him, which in a way Devin Haney does, what kind of fight's that going to make for? Stevenson against Devin Haney would be a great matchup, but it might be the worst fight to watch as far as entertainment goes.
Right, because of Haney's style and the way he can box. He's not going to carry and go into the buzzsaw like a guy like Yoshenko had to do. Jack, people don't realize, and I don't mean you, but to be a great boxer, you have to be physically strong. Okay? Not every fighter is a life taker, but to win in boxing, you only have to punch hard enough to disrupt your opponent. And when you hit them clean, okay, think about this. We know Joe Frazier is a much bigger puncher than Muhammad Ali, but Joe, for some reason, could not dent Oscar Bonavena because Bonavena saw everything was coming, and a lot of Joe's stuff is round, and you can pick those off. But Ali and Ellis hit him with straight punches that they walked him into that he didn't see. And the accuracy and the speed of the punch can be just as effective. And what makes Stevenson tough is you can't hit him. I think he's physically stronger than he looks. So I think he takes a good shot. And then we saw an arsenal of punches that he threw the other night that just, I mean, I felt bad for Yoshenko. I mean, every time he thought he had to read, he saw something else that he wasn't ready for. And it's like once he made Yoshenko think a little bit like, oh, I can't go at him like he's handcuffed.
Frank.
What's that? Yoshino. But that little bit of hesitation, it's almost like in football. Did you ever see the NFL films of the Dolphins-Vikings Super Bowl, and Shula narrates it, and he says, we took advantage of their aggression, and we use it against them. And then when they caught on to what they were doing, and they let up a little bit, then we attacked them. And what happened was the other night with Yoshino, once he realized he had to think and process his way in, and he just couldn't come in like the guy was empty-handed, that little bit of hesitation made it duck soup for Stevenson just to butcher him, and he did. And, you know, Yoshino didn't complain after the fight about anything. But, Jack, let me ask you this. Our friend Joe Bergman and some other guys thought this stoppage was too soon. I don't think that it was. I mean, could they have let it go on a little more? But by the you could see by the end of the fifth round.
Purpose. The fight wasn't going to turn around. It was inevitable.
Yeah, I like Joe. Joe's a very, very into it boxing guy. He has a good aptitude. I disagree with him on that one.
Frank, the criteria should not be whether or not a fighter could defend himself. It should be the amount of cumulative punishment. Now, there are exceptions if it's a back and forth fight. Okay, one fight is showing a lot of firepower and is very much in the fight. But when, some fights, most fights, the ending becomes inevitable after a while. And
Yoshinko Jack didn't win a minute of this fight.
Right, so why let it go on?
Not a minute.
Why let it go on? On a rare occasion, it's going to be a miraculous turnaround. But more likely than not, a fighter is going to suffer serious injury. I mean, I was at a fight in Las Vegas. It was on the undercard of De La Hoya and Whitaker at the time of some accident. Mickey was fighting a guy, Agapito Sanchez. Mickey Ward didn't win 1 second of that fight until the 7th round. He lands a body shot and
that was it.
But that's kind of right. But Mickey Ward wasn't getting beaten up badly. He wasn't taking like a great amount of punishment. He was like losing rounds. And Shakur Stevenson was going to close the show sooner or later. And if he didn't close the show, he wasn't going to lose any rounds. He was going to continue to administer.
Jack, he was the puncher in the fight. Not only was he the better boxer and technician, he was the puncher in the fight. So what could Yoshino do? He was done.
He was on my pound for pound list. Shakur Stevenson.
Stevenson is definitely on there. I haven't looked at it lately or made a list, but he's as good as anybody out there. And with guys like Earl Spence and Terrence Crawford not fighting, I mean, you got to put him right there based on what he brings to the ring. And you can't really question his opposition. And we may see him against the winner of Lomachenko and Haney. However, Keyshawn Davis, another lightweight. Jack, it's early in his career. I think Davis is one of the best offensive fighters I've seen in a while. He has a great repertoire of punches. I want to see him step up. I think we're going to hear from him down the road. So he made a good showing. Again, offensive display against an overmatched opponent, but he looked good. And also on the card, right before the main event, Jared Big Baby Anderson, 14-0, 14 knockouts, won again against an undefeated opponent. And look, Jared Anderson has to step up, but I will say this, Jack.
Yeah, you're finally calling him out, Frank. You're finally
he has to step up, but I will tell you this. I would pick Jared Anderson to beat Anthony Joshua if they sign next.
Well, obviously the people guiding Jared Anderson, they might not feel that way because they're not even
I think they would take that fight, Jack, if they could get it.
Match him with a gatekeeper, match him with Carlos Takam. Okay, I got to fight. Carlos Takam just beat Tony Yoka in France, okay? So the gatekeeper got a useful win. Gatekeepers do win now and then. They get
they do.
A decent win. Carlos Takam got a halfway decent win. You could argue that Carlos Takam is a top 25 heavyweight. You could maybe
I think so.
Okay, so that's the name Jared Anderson should get on this record. Take that fight. I have another fight for him. That's a step up a fight. Jarrell Big Baby Miller, he's done serving a suspension for whatever he was taking. Match him.
But if I'm Anderson's manager, Jack, I don't take that fight. There's nothing to gain there with Big Baby, and Big Baby is dangerous.
If Jared Anderson is the elite prospect you think he is, he should be able to win.
I just think that's a tough matchup on the style because Big Baby, the other Big Baby, is strong, hard to hurt, and he could be there for a while. I would pick Jared Anderson. I just don't think he would look great beating him, and I don't think many guys would look great beating him. But, Jack, I'll tell you this right now. You and a lot of other guys want to see Jared Anderson fight Carlos Takam. I think it's a good matchup, but I guarantee you this. If they fought in their next fight and Jared Anderson stopped him in 6 rounds, a lot of the guys that are saying they want to see that fight would say, well, he didn't beat anybody, and Takam he's coming off a fluke win. He would get no credit beating him either. That's just the way this game works.
I know, Frank, but I am getting tired of seeing Jared Anderson on these ESPN shows over and over, same type of opponents. The time has come for something.
But, Jack, he's only had 14 fights.
But he's been around a while. and he's getting the exposure.
And he's what, 23 years old? I mean, I
But
can't really kill him for that.
if these fights were off TV, then that would be another matter. You know, the guy I mentioned before, who lost his title, Akhmat Dalayev, he was a belt holder, a couple of sanctioning bodies. He only had 11 fights. 11 fights going into Saturday.
But Jack, remember, but you can't compare him to Anderson for the fact that Anderson is a heavyweight. Boxing clamors for a good American heavyweight right now. So he's going to get some breaks that the other guys don't get. But I mean, 14 fights, I can't kill him, but he has to step up. I do think he has the goods. Sure, there's questions we don't know. He gets hit a lot, but I think it's because he doesn't respect his opposition. But I think he has the tools. He has a really good jab. He can punch. He can move. He switches to southpaw. I think he can be a player. And Jack, remember, think of the division we're talking about. Tyson Fury, we never know where his head's at. Usyk is what, 36? He's not a real big, powerful heavyweight. He doesn't mow people down. Wilder, we don't know what he has left from the fights with Fury. AJ is damaged goods. We'll get to see Joe Joyce this weekend. So how many outstanding heavyweights are there for Jared Anderson to fight?
Well, you shouldn't say AJ's damaged goods. I think you're saying that to an extreme. I want to know whether Jared Anderson is the real thing or is he another Michael Grant?
Okay, we're not going to know that by him beating Carlos Takam, though.
It's a step in the right direction. That's the step up fight.
Okay, but if he kills Takam, we're still not going to know that.
No,
that's all I'm saying.
There. I mean, I lean more on the side that Jared Anderson is the real thing. Don't get me wrong, but the
real thing in 2023, he's a title threat, no doubt.
The time has come for him to step up. You know, they don't make these great fights the way they used to. Why not a fight Jared Anderson against Frank Sanchez?
That would be a nice fight. I don't know. I have a feeling somebody would back out of that fight, though.
I'll tell you something, and I want to retroactively once again give credit. It took place, about a year and a half or something like that. You'll have to look it up. 2 years ago, Joe Joyce against Daniel Dubois. Two unbeaten guys in England. They didn't have to fight one another. Two rising stars.
And Dubois was the name going into that fight.
And they fought. They fought one another. Just the idea. The fight was made. I think at the time Frank Warren promoted both of them, and he wasn't as high on Joe Joyce. He didn't think
that was Joe Joyce's arrival.
That was his arrival. And Daniel Dubois, he came back. It's sanctioning bodies. He's U6 mandatory. So he's actually going to get a shot at the title.
Jack, we'll see with Jared Anderson. We agree he has to step it up. But let me just say one thing before we move on to counter what you just said, and I'm going to say it very calmly. I'm not going to let you get me upset and tweak me like you do. There are a lot of guys out there, writers, analysts, and fighters that I know you respect. And every one of them says the exact same thing I've said about Anthony Joshua since he fought Ruiz. He is a damaged fighter. And Jack, it just came out this week or this last couple days that he's not going to fight again until December. Now, he said he was going to fight 3 times this year. Now it looks like at the most it'll be December. So that's 2 times in 12 months. Let me ask you this. What is going to get better with Anthony Joshua between now and December? That's going to be another 8 months, 7.5 months of the doubts in his mind lingering. He's a 2-time unified champ. He's 33 years old. He's been in with almost the best guys in the division. He is a damaged fighter, and he's searching for something that he's not going to find. I don't care how long he works with Derek James. Derek James can't fix it. He is not one of those guys that can overcome it. So just remember this. The Teddy Atlases and the other guys, the Joe Goosens and other guys out there, who we both respect, all say the same thing. So when you say I'm too hard on him, I take umbrage with that.
Okay,
Time's yours.
Yeah. I understand where you're coming from, Frank, but I think it's about expectations. A lot of people were labeling Joshua the next great heavyweight, not only because of what he could do in the ring, because he was so marketable outside of it.
Right.
It came crashing down against Andy Ruiz. And it's all about expectations. If we're looking at Joshua to be a great heavyweight, no, we're not going to get that. But we could get a guy who still conceivably can legitimately win the heavyweight title again under the right circumstance. We're looking at a guy who could be a major player in the division for the next few years still. I'm not.
If he could win the title, Jack, yes.
So what is so bad losing two highly competitive fights against Usyk? Okay,
It's the Jack.
Against the most skilled, I didn't say best. The most skilled fighter in the heavyweight division is Usyk. And
I'm going to tell you what's wrong with that.
Yeah,
Jack, losing to Usyk does not make him a stiff or a bum, but it's the way he lost, that he didn't put up a fight against a guy who is smaller than him, who is not a puncher on any level. Now, look, Usyk hits hard enough to beat anybody out there, but it's not a guy that instills fear. And Joshua, in the rematch, when everything was on the line, beat the crap out of Usyk in the 9th round, and that made it 5-4 on the cards with 3 rounds to go. And Jack, he just didn't have that extra gear to seize the fight when it was there and he could possibly take it. So to me, it's not that he lost, it's how he lost, that he didn't go down with a fight. He went down fighting against Andy Ruiz, but it didn't work out for him. When he fought him again, Andy Ruiz was a 400 or 300 pound turtle that couldn't move. Joshua never tickled him one time, played tag for 12 rounds, did what he had to do, but he didn't look impressive. Luis Ortiz beat up Andy Ruiz more than Anthony Joshua did when he fought him a few months back. So that's the thing. It's the way that he lost. That's my issue.
Yeah, but remember the way he beat Vladimir Klitschko too. So if you kind of wonder his heart, and keep this in mind, he didn't have to fight Usyk the first time. He didn't have to. He took the fight. He didn't have to enforce the immediate rematch. They could have a so-called tune-up, a confidence builder. He insisted on going.
How many two-time champs need tune-ups, Jack?
But most people were advising him not to go into the immediate rematch, and he had no hesitation in enforcing that.
Okay.
No hesitation at all. Look at all the fights that Aaron made, Frank. That Aaron made. Fighters are kind of not showing a result. Look at Tyson Fury. You can't even get him in the ring with you.
No, you're right. Tyson Fury, he's a different story.
Joshua went in twice. Joshua also signed the contract previously to fight Tyson Fury. So there's your evidence. He's not ducking Fury.
Jack, Anthony, I don't put him down for that at all. But let me just refute, in my opinion, what you just said. He fought Usyk, Jack, because he was a heavy favorite. He looked at Usyk as a cruiserweight, and he didn't think there was a risk there. So he said, I'll beat this little guy and get a lot of credit.
No, Usyk was a threat going to the first fight. I picked Usyk to upset Joshua in the first fight, meaning so that showed he was a threat, in that fight. And everyone knew how good Usyk. They knew that Usyk was a very live underdog. But
Jack, Joshua was sure that he was very, very confident that it was a safe fight, that he wouldn't get knocked out, and he gained a lot of props by beating a guy who was such a respected boxer who was undefeated. And when you talk about the rematch, Jack, he kind of had to do it. It's like you can't lose a decision to a guy moving up from cruiserweight and say, oh, before I fight you, I have to have some tune-ups to get myself right so I can beat you. No, he went at him again, and he did a little better, but he just didn't get it done. So, again, it's not that he lost. To me, It's how he lost. And I think the other sharks out there, Joyce, Wilder, maybe Jared Anderson.
Joyce is fighting this weekend. Joyce is fighting.
You're right. And we'll get to that in a second. But, Jack, before we do that, there was another big upset this weekend, and that was Sebastian Fundora, the Towering Inferno, fought Brian Mendoza, was dominating the fight, and got stopped in the 7th round in what might be the knockout of the year so far. It was a beautiful hook, right hand hook. Mendoza lost every round. Fundora was out on his feet, basically. He was counted out. It was a stunning upset. Fundora, Jack, is a guy I actually, for some reason, never met him, don't know him, but I like him. I root for him. He frustrates me because he throws away his size. He's a guy that's 6'5" with an 80-some inch reach. He fights inside. He doesn't move his head. He's there to get hit. But I like the guy. I like how he accepted. No excuses. I got caught. I made a mistake. This is boxing. It happens. I'm glad he's not hurt, and I think he'll be back, and he's somebody I root for. But I have to admit, I did not see that coming.
Aberration or not, the Fundora stoppage, was it just one of those things, or is it an indication of what could be going forward?
I think we could see him get iced again. I don't think that's a one-off. I think we could see him get iced again, but I do think he'll come back and he'll win some fights and he'll be a player again. I don't know if he'll ever get the title, but I think he'll be a player.
There's certain aberrations in boxing. For example, Hurricane Carter stopping Emil Griffith in 1 round. And I tell people, if they fought 50 times, that's the only
Never happened, right.
I know Carter's a big puncher, but it could happen in boxing. Oh, speaking of that, there's this thing at the Metropolitan Opera based on the life of Emil Griffith. I don't know, am I going to get to see that? But if I could picture all these people who are big fans of the opera. They're going to learn all about Emil Griffith. So that's really something.
One of my all-time favorites. All right, Jack, this weekend, and I'm going to let you handle this. Joe Joyce, 15-0, 14 knockouts, is fighting what? Shilly Zhang, 24, 1-1, 19 knockouts, and what amounts to a heavyweight elimination bout. Zhang was just on TV a couple months back. He fought Philip Hargovic. How do you say his name?
I don't have it in front of me.
Hargovic, and he lost a close decision. Zhang is 6'6". He's about 250. He only knows one speed, and that's in style. That is forward. Southpaw, has some power. I see him and Joe Joyce clashing, meeting center ring, and I have to say the guy that backs up is probably the guy that loses. This is not a gimme for Joe Joyce.
Yeah, I get a hard time getting a read on Joe Joyce. He puts such relentless pressure on an opponent. He can break anyone.
We saw that against Joseph Parker.
Right, and I would give him a chance even against the likes of Tyson Fury. And Joyce lost to Usyk in the amateurs, but I'd give him a shot in that fight because the guy keeps coming and coming and coming, and he keeps punching. But Frank, he's so darn easy to hit. He's so darn easy to hit. He's got a really good chin. But
I think if a focused Fury would outbox him and win a decision, I'm not sure about Usyk. He might wear Usyk down with that constant, unbreakable pressure where Usyk might get tired from the strain of trying to outbox him and hold him off. Let's see what he looks like this weekend. But I think that's a very compelling fight. It's on ESPN Plus. I'm looking forward to that because Joyce, or the winner, is going to be a player. I'm going to pick Joyce to win. I'm going to say probably by a decision. I want to see how Joyce looks because, again, I would take him also over Anthony Joshua and maybe even Wilder. I don't think he would beat Fury if Fury is 85 or 90% of the guy that fought Wilder, but I think Joyce is a player in the division.
I think
who do you like in the fight?
I like Joyce, but if he wins big, decisively, the way I think he is, he kind of becomes the boogeyman of the heavyweight division, the fighter no one really wants to fight. I can't believe Tyson Fury would want to fight him unless he has no one else to go in with, which, meaning if Fury doesn't fight Usyk, then he could fight Joyce. But why would he want to fight Joyce instead of Usyk necessarily? I mean,
I think he'd look at Joyce, Jack, as an easier fight stylistically.
Fury would sooner look to fight Anthony Joshua. And if what you're saying about Joshua is correct, and you might be, Joshua would then want to cash out. Eddie Hearn is promoter, make as much money as he can, the biggest fights he can. So this way, the Fury Joshua fight is a much bigger fight than Fury and Joe Joyce. Joyce Fury might actually be a better fight, but it's not as big as far as doing business. Why would Deontay Wilder want to fight Joe Joyce? You see, like, the options for Joyce really aren't going to be there. That's the main concern. He's the alternate opponent. If everything goes wrong with the big names in negotiations, then Joyce, gets a shot. If I had to say what big name Joyce would eventually go in with, the first big name, assuming he wins this weekend, my feeling is it would be Usyk. Because there's a history of them fighting in the amateurs, familiarity.
But if Usyk's worried about the mandatories, Jack, and holding the belts, that pushes Joyce back a little bit.
Sooner or later, Joyce gets made a mandatory. Sooner or later.
That's fair. Joyce has got a lot of momentum going. I want to see what he looks like. This is his night to make a statement, because if he puts Zhang away and he looks good doing it or beats him convincingly, that's a pretty good win, and that'll definitely get people talking. Before we get to the part where we talk about a fight that was just made that we both want to see, there's another fight coming up in 2 weeks. Everybody knows the fight that it is. It's the fight between Tank Davis and Ryan King Garcia. I've watched 2 of the 3 all-access shows on Showtime promoting the fight. And, Jack, let me ask you this. The way these 2 guys are talking, if I didn't know better, they're making this out, and I know they have to say these things, but if I didn't know better, I would think this is Tommy Hearns against Sugar Ray Leonard, September 16th, 1981. That's what they're talking about. Like, this could be the fight of the ages, the biggest fight in boxing. No, it's not. It's an elimination bout for 2 guys that really don't have the title, that aren't really all that tested at lightweight. Ryan Garcia, he has a nice win over Luke Campbell. Tank is cleaned out 30, some guys at 35. But Tank Davis, as much as I like him and I think he's really good and I favor him to win that fight right now, this is not Leonard Hearns by any means at all.
It's not De La Hoya Trinidad either.
Oh, no. No, these guys aren't at that level.
But they're lightweights, and we're talking about welterweights here too.
But Jack, they're talking like this is the biggest fight in boxing, and it's not. It's only because they say it, but it's not the biggest fight in boxing.
Well, it's the biggest fight that's been made, at least. At least they're fighting one another. And the only reason they're fighting one another is because Tank is going to get sentenced, a couple of weeks after the fight, and chances are he's going to be inactive for a while. I had no idea what the judge is going to say. But once the judge turned down the plea deal from the prosecutors, okay, that would...
And not a good sign.
Right, not a good sign at all. So, in any event, Tank is going to be inactive a little while. So everyone with the promotion, common sense tells you, make the fight. It's kind of Ali Frazier revisited from their first fight.
Because a lot of people thought Ali was going to go to jail.
What else weekend? We're not getting Spence Crawford. We hear the talking. The 2 of them.
Yeah, June 17th. Yeah, right.
With one another, and all that. And if it's June, and even if Spence Crawford fought, let me backtrack. Let me say I believe it now that it actually might come off. Okay, let me play devil's advocate. Am I as excited as I was if they were going to fight last November? It's
Nope.
kind of the expiration.
It's lost its luster.
It lost something off its fastball. Yeah, absolutely.
And Jack, it's been so long since these guys fought. Who knows what they are?
Okay, let me ask you this. What would be better fights than Tank and Garcia? Better be Bivol. What would you rather see, that or Tank and Ryan Garcia?
Better be Bivol.
Crawford Spence. What would you rather?
Crawford Spence.
Assuming, and I shouldn't have, the winner, let me say, of Haney Lomachenko against Shakur Stevenson, the winner.
Now we're talking. That's the next level, especially if it's Haney, because I think that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jack. What'd you say?
Haney and Stevenson is more attractive than Garcia and Tank, I think.
Yes, but if Lomachenko were to beat Haney, I don't think him against Stevenson would be as good, because I really think against Stevenson, Lomachenko's size and age would really stand out, and I wouldn't give him the shot in that fight. But I would pick Stevenson probably, but I would at least entertain that Haney does bring some things to the table to offset Stevenson.
Let me give you a hard one now. What would you rather have, Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, their fight, or the one that is getting rescheduled, Inouye against Stephen Fulton?
Inouye against Fulton.
Yeah, there you go. So all the hype we're hearing, Tank and Garcia, it's an excellent fight. It's a heck of a fight. Don't get me wrong. Kudos to them fighting one another.
And Jack, that's the one thing that came out in the All Access, where they both said, and they could have been full of it, but they both said, look, we're taking this fight. We hope that this gets other guys off the fence and that the other big fights can be made so boxing fans can have something to look forward to. I mean, when you see these elite guys fighting each other, I don't care what anybody says. There still is nothing better than this sport when you see that. I mean, even Stevenson the other night, even though it was one-sided, watching a guy that good, I was pumped to watch that fight for all 6 rounds.
Yeah.
Jack, also this weekend, it was announced right before that fight that it's official that on June 10th at Madison Square Garden, Teofimo Lopez is going to fight Josh Taylor, I believe, for the WBO 140-pound title.
No, I should have you do a list, Frank. The pound-for-pound damaged goods list. The guys.
Oh, yeah, I know. All right, so you're talking about Lopez.
Like Anthony Joshua on that list. You could put both Teofimo and Josh Taylor on that list, Frank.
Josh Taylor, because he hasn't fought for a while, and he looked so great the last time out. Yes.
And every time he talked about the Jack Catterall fight, he sounds like a bumbling idiot. And now he's finally cooling it down. But what bothered me, supposedly, with Josh Taylor, he wanted to get back at Jack Catterall so badly, supposedly. And they signed the fight. He'd gotten injured. And then he turns around and he's fighting Teofimo. Go through with the Catterall fight, the rematch, if you want it that badly. It was paying him big money.
But, Jack, isn't Catterall going to fight Prograis?
It's not signed to my knowledge. But no, the reason Catterall turned to Prograis because Josh Taylor suddenly went off.
Gave him the runaround.
Yeah, exactly.
But Prograis and Catterall is a good fight too.
It's a very good fight. Well, Prograis really wants to fight Jose Ramirez, the guy who lost to Josh Taylor. The guy.
Taylor beat both Ramirez and Prograis.
Ramirez is a heck of a good fighter, and it would be a heck of a good fight.
I like Prograis in that fight.
Money. Ramirez wants at least a 50-50 split as the challenger. He says, I bring more to the table. I'm a bigger draw. Actually, he's correct there. But with that said, how big a fight is it? How big a draw he is? If you want to get your name out there and be really big, go 60-40, get 40%, beat Prograis, and all of a sudden you're in this marquee position.
I would love to see that fight.
Good fight.
It's a shame, Jack, that these guys don't fight, because there are some really good fights out there. Everybody, especially some of the older guys like us, we always talk about the good old days, but these could be the good old days if the right names would fight and stop playing around and stop worrying about A side, B side, undefeated, and all that crap. I mean, you can lose, but if you lose good, look at Wilder. He was stopped twice by Fury, but both fights were exciting. He was in both fights, and people want to see him fight now.
He really wasn't in the rematch, the second fight, in all fairness. He really.
Well, I did say he was in 2 out of 3. Right. The rematch, he had his worst showing.
The first fight was a draw, so give him his due there. And even though most people.
But I thought he lost 9 rounds.
No, I didn't think he lost 9 rounds. But the bottom line is he did knock Fury down twice, legitimate knockdowns, and the second knockdown was a devastating knockdown.
Fury got up from his grave.
Yeah. We have any fantasy fights, Frank?
All right, Jack. We don't have a lot tonight, so we're going to have to chew on these a little bit. All right, I'm going to throw one that you weren't ready for, but this is probably the most fun. Jack Johnson versus Mike Tyson.
All these fights, Frank, I think we've got to prorate a guy what he could be. Okay? Jack Johnson would be a bigger guy if he fought in Mike Tyson's era, and I kind of have to judge him on that. But Jack Johnson wasn't tall. He wasn't a
6 foot.
Yeah, tall guy. Tyson would have the most difficulty with tall fighters. Johnson wasn't a great offensive fighter. He was great at smothering opponents, tying them up. I get the feeling he would tie Tyson up enough times. It would be a sloppy fight, a lot of clinching, but Tyson would be getting off more, and Tyson would win an ugly decision over Jack Johnson, an ugly decision.
I think Tyson would stop Johnson. I think Jack Johnson is a little overrated. And before I say that, let me just preface why. It's not fair, Jack, because there are only about 7 films of Jack Johnson that we can see. Now, imagine if there were only 7 films of Muhammad Ali, and they were Frazier 1, Liston 1, Koopman, Shavers, Cleveland Williams, Quarry 1, and say Zora Foley. We really wouldn't have a good picture of Ali. So it's kind of hard to judge Johnson on the 7 films. But I just think that Tyson's style, the pressure coming in low, I think it would be very hard for Johnson to tie him up. And if you look back, there really wasn't a sophisticated swarmer until Dempsey. Dempsey was after Jack Johnson. I don't think Jack Johnson could deal with the evolution of Mike Tyson.
Swarmer, Frank.
Pardon me?
Tyson wasn't a swarmer.
Who?
Mike Tyson wasn't a swarmer. Mike Tyson didn't cut the ring off. Dempsey cut the ring off for
Jack. Mike Tyson was an attacker. He wasn't. He was a swarmer that kind of fought at mid-range, unlike Frazier. But he still had to come forward and force the fight. Everybody that backed him up, he lost, and he was always a fish out of water. He would have to attack against Jack Johnson. And I just think, now you say we have to add weight and strength to Johnson. I just think Tyson's overall game, the head movement, the combination punching, I just don't think Johnson could tie him up and hold him off. And again, there are not many all-time top greats or top 10 greats who I pick Johnson to beat. I think a Tyson or a Frazier or a Dempsey are his worst nightmare. He fought in an era where the guys came in straight and they led with their face. And that's not Tyson, Frazier, or Dempsey.
Old timers like ourselves are very familiar with Nat Fleischer, who at one point he was the ultimate voice in boxing, the guy that found and edited Ring magazine. He passed away in 1972, Nat Fleischer. But I remember when I was a kid, I would call the Ring magazine office shortly before Fleischer died, and I would be asking him, make-believe fights. And I asked him about Muhammad Ali. I may use the term Cassius Clay at the time, I don't know, against Jack Johnson. And Fleischer thought Johnson was the greatest heavyweight of all time. He says, no, Clay could have given, Johnson a good fight for 6 rounds or so. That's how that was how he put it.
Jack, Nat Fleischer was a case study. He was funny. He was so prejudiced to the old school. And he had, if you remember, he had Jack Johnson number 1. Remember who we had number 2?
Jim Jeffries.
Jim Jeffries. Which I agree that probably prime for prime, Johnson may outbox Jeffries. But I think he had Bob Fitzsimmons 3 or 4. I know this much. Fitzsimmons and Jack Johnson were his 2 favorite fighters.
Yeah.
Fleischers. All right, Jack. So we both agree that Mike Tyson takes. I'm sorry.
We both agree. You think he stops Johnson?
I think Tyson stops Johnson. I have no problem. I'm not even sure how competitive it is. All right. Kid Gavilan versus Louis Rodriguez. Tough call. Tough call.
Very tough fight. Rodriguez would be darting in and out. Gavilan would be a little better from long range. And I think that would decide the fight. I think Gavilan's jab would be more effective in this fight. And all of Rodriguez's cuteness and the effective work he did against Emil Griffith, even though he lost 3 of the 4 fights, the 3 lost all by split decision.
But really, he should be 2-2 against them.
I'm not sure. I mean, I watched 2 of the fights. I scored.
The consensus is that, and I believe I had it for Rodriguez that he won the 3rd fight.
Okay, but I think Gavilan edges him out. Split decision.
All right, I like Gavilan too. I think that in this fight, Gavilan is the aggressor and forces the action. I think the biggest difference is, Jack, I think Gavilan can just put his punches together a little bit quicker and better, and that's not taking anything away from Rodriguez, because Louis Rodriguez makes my top 7 all-time welterweights, but so does Gavilan. I don't think there's a knockout in the fight because Gavilan had a great chin, and he's not quite a big enough puncher, in my opinion, to knock out Rodriguez. So I think it goes the distance. I think the difference is in the exchanges that they have. I think Gavilan looks a little flashier and may finish more exchanges better, and I think he'd win a really close decision.
We agree.
All right, here's one. Evander Holyfield versus Vladimir Klitschko.
I saw some people on social media when you posted that, Frank, all seeming to take up for Holyfield. Holyfield was a great fighter. I'm not selling him short, but people sell Vladimir Klitschko short. I mean, was it Klitschko's fault he didn't have top-level opposition throughout his career? I think Klitschko beats Holyfield. He can control the distance from long
Really?
range. I really do. And Klitschko was versatile. People don't realize that he wasn't a robot. And then
Jack.
Perform. He controls Holyfield from the outside. Tough fight, yeah. But Klitschko was better on his feet than, let's say, Lennox Lewis was.
Jack, come on.
Yeah,
you can't be serious. Klitschko is better on his feet. I don't think he does one thing as good as Lennox Lewis. They both have big right hands, but Lewis never even tickled Holyfield with his right hand.
Klitschko had a better jab than Lennox Lewis.
Oh, Jack, and Klitschko had a pretty good jab, but not better than Lennox Lewis's. No way. Lennox's was faster. It had more variation. He actually used it more. Klitschko would use his to keep you off of him out there, but I don't think it was an effective punch. It was an effective punch, but not to the degree of Lewis.
Klitschko was a dominant heavyweight for most of his career. He dominated. If you consider him a world heavyweight champion and consider the sanctioning body,
I do.
Isn't he second behind Joe Louis?
Jack, he held the title for 10 years, but Jack, we don't have much time left. Let me just say this. I think Holyfield's toughness and aggression would cause Klitschko to clam up, and I think Holyfield would go at him, and I think he would take his heart, and I think eventually he'd beat him up, and they'd have to stop the fight. Holyfield walked through the best bow 2 out of 3 times without getting stopped. Lennox Lewis couldn't den him in 2 fights, and Tyson couldn't den him either. I think Holyfield, it comes down to this. Holyfield's aggression and toughness, I think, overwhelmed Vlad, and he stops him.
Well, we don't. Well, we're out of time now, Frank. So, maybe we'll pick up on this next week.
All right, Jack. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week. We'll talk about the Joyce fight. Jack and I both like Joyce. And until then, see you next